Welcome to the second instructional video on the Family Planning Market Analyzer. In our prior video, we looked at how you can use this tool to understand the current family planning market. In this video, we'll be exploring scenarios of market changes, so changes to both source mix and method mix, and what are the implications of that. Moving on to our website. So here we are at fppmarketanalyzer.org. We're going to start by selecting our country. In this case, I'm going to select Ethiopia. And we can take a quick peek to look at the current situation, like we did in the last video, about Ethiopia on the source mix and method mix. So we see that it's largely driven by the public sector, and the most popular method is injections followed by implants. So now we're going to go to our navigational panel on the side and choose Explore Policy Scenarios. And you can see multiple options here. We're going to start with the Policy Scenario Generator. And here you can see that there are 4 different policy scenarios that you can select. The first one is without changes in method mix or source mix, what efforts are needed to keep up with the increases in users? Our second scenario is what if task sharing is allowed in the private sector to increase its share of injectables? So here we're really making a change to the source mix. So I'm going to click on scenario 2. And now we can review some of the data below. Here you can see there's an increase in the private sector. And what these changes will mean for visits by sector. We'll see a decrease in the public sector and an increase in the private sector in terms of visits. You can see this displayed here in more detail. And finally, you have a series of tables that help you look at differences in terms of visits, as well as commodities that can be helpful for planning. So if you wanted to do something like this, where you're going to make a shift in terms of the private to the public sector or vice versa, you can also build your own scenario by changing source mix. And here what you would do is you would specify from the status quo what changes you expect, and then click on Submit. Going back to our policy scenario generator, we can also look at scenario 3. What if implants increase in popularity, but the sources where they are available stays the same? So here we're changing the method mix and keeping the source mix the same. So as we scroll down, we can see these changes in method mix with an increase in implants and a decrease in the next most common one, which is injections. We can see this has a limited effect on source mix, which it reduces the private sector by 2%, largely because implants are primarily delivered in the public sector. And then as before, you can see what 2020 versus this new 2023 looks like, a decrease here in injections and an increase in implants, as well as looking at the number of visits by sector and how those are expected. And here you'll notice that the number of visits in both the public and the private sector are expected to decrease because of that shift towards implants, where there are fewer visits per user. And again, we can look at the detailed results for visits by user, as well as commodities that can be useful for planning purposes. If you wanted to make your own method mix scenario, again, you can build your own scenario here, specify the changes you want, and hit the Submit button. Finally, we have scenario 4. What if the barriers were removed to allow the private sector to play a greater role in LARC provision as implants increase in popularity? So here we're having both a method mix and a source mix change simultaneously. And so we can click on that scenario and see the results. What I'd like to do now, though, is focus on building our own scenario with this in mind and showing how that can be done. So in this scenario, I'm going to consider a private low-cost pill coming onto the market, which is expected to siphon away current injection users. So let's say we anticipate a 20% reduction in injections and a 20% increase in pills. from 63.45 to 43.45, and an increase in pills to, and you'll see this adds up to 100 below. So that's the method mix change we're expecting. We hit submit. And now we can go down to the source mix. And to adjust the source mix, we can move these slider bars from public to private, or vice versa. So here we're going to say, okay, among these pills, we expect an increase in private. So I'm going to move it up to closer to around 50+%. And again, we'll hit submit. So now this tool is factoring in both of those changes simultaneously, and we can see the resulting changes here. So we can see how our method mix is shifting, fewer injections, more pills. We can also see the source mix with an increase expected in the private sector. Here are the number of users, as well as the number of visits. You can see the comparison here by visit and sector and method, as well as these more detailed tables that can be useful for program planning purposes. In particular, it's interesting to think about the needs for commodities in this scenario. How many pill cycles will be needed? How many fewer injectables will be needed based on this scenario that we've posed? So that's a brief overview of how one explores these scenarios in this tool. In our next video, we'll be looking at data on key market segments and the implications of shifts in the public-private sector in those segments. So thank you for watching.